A Beechcraft bonanza spirals out of control. In the cockpit, both occupants have somehow become immobilized. An investigation revealed how a series of bad decisions and a fatal communication error led to the deaths of 2 people.
Hi, can I get the fuel, oil, and oxygen bottles topped up, please?
Sure.
Duluth ground, November 5199 Hotel, requesting taxi.
November 5199er Hotel. Taxi hold short runway 03 via Charlie.
Taxiing to runway 03 via Charlie, November 5199 Hotel. November 5199 Hotel, holding short runway 03 at Charlie.
November 5199er Hotel. Cleared for takeoff runway 03.
Cleared for takeoff runway 03, November 5199 Hotel.
At 11:28 a.m., November 5199 Hotel finally gets clearance for takeoff. Eric Ducker and his wife are finally going home. Just before 11:30 a.m., November 5199 Hotel takes off into the skies, headed for Kansas City. Climbing through 1800, the Bonanza flies into thick clouds and turbulence surrounding Duluth. All of a sudden, the Bonanza pitches up steeply and bangs sharply to the right.
Niner Hotel, Minneapolis Center.
Now the Bonanza starts banking sharply to the left. Eric Drucker doesn't seem to understand what's going on.
Niner Hotel, Minneapolis Center. Niner Hotel, Minneapolis Center. November 519 Hotel, Minneapolis Center. Everything okay?
A-OK, and climbing through 5,000, turning back on course now. That turbulence was a lot worse than moderate.
Niner Hotel, Roger. Clearance to return on course.
A few minutes later, ATC radios the Bonanza with a PIREP from a nearby aircraft.
Bonanza Niner Hotel, Minneapolis Center. We just had a report of moderate to severe chop at 10,000 feet from a descending 727 just south of you. About 10 miles east of your flight path. You can stay at 8,000 for now until we clear you to 12,000. Tops are still reported at 11,000.
We're starting to pick up some ice here at 8,000, so I think we'll continue climbing. We appreciate you expediting that clearance to 12,000, and I'll let you know if we run into that turbulence.
The oxygen levels at 8,000 feet are a lot lower compared to sea level. So both Eric Drucker and his wife decide it's time to don their oxygen mask to prevent themselves from incapacitation. Moments later, they hit turbulence again. Then, ATC notices something weird about the Bonanza's flight path.
Bonanza Niner Hotel. You are 20 degrees right of course and above your assigned altitude. Please advise.
Control problem. Heavy turbulence. Need that clearance to 12,000. Now.
You are cleared to 12,000. See your condition.
That would be the last exchange between ATC and the stricken plane. In the cockpit, the situation is getting critical. Both Eric and Frida realize something is wrong, but it's too late. Trolls, there is no hope for November 5199. "35 minutes after taking off, November 5199 hotel crashes into a field just outside Duluth. In this Beechcraft Bonanza accident, the investigation revealed a series of minor errors that combined into a deadly chain of events which ended in this tragic accident. These errors can be divided into two distinct categories: the poor decisions that the pilot Eric Drucker and his wife Frida Drucker made, as well as a series of communication breakdowns between the parties involved. If one of these errors were eliminated or varied in some way, there is a high likelihood this accident would never have happened. One of the poor decisions that the occupants made on that fateful day was to perform the flight impaired. During the investigation, autopsies of Eric Drucker's body revealed that his alcohol level was at 0.05%, which is 25% higher than the FAA's maximum of 0.04%. It's not like there were zero signs provided, because there were. The morning of the flight, there were clear signs to suggest that Eric was still impaired from the wedding and the party the night before. However, it is also clear that both Eric and Frida did not fully appreciate the severity of Eric's impairment. Eric was feeling unwell that morning, to the point where he had to push their departure back another hour. This should have raised red flags, as Frida is not capable of safely flying the plane if something happens to Eric. Eric, Frida, or one of their relatives should have spoken up and should have probably canceled the flight. However, neither did. Since alcohol and age are important factors that determines an individual's tolerance for hypoxia, the decision to take off put both occupants at an even greater risk. As a result, both Eric and Frida took off with a decreased hypoxia tolerance and therefore put themselves and their aircraft at risk. While this factor did not alone down the aircraft, it was a contributing factor in a chain of events. Another poor decision on the pilot's part was the decision to continue with the flight given the deteriorating weather conditions. The forecast for the flight's route was for clouds with ceilings as low as 1800 and tops of around 11,000, as well as light to moderate turbulence throughout the flight. The heavy cloud coverage played a factor in the accident, as it likely caused a drunk and hypoxic Eric Drucker to experience spatial disorientation at least twice during the fateful flight. Evidence of this can be seen throughout the flight, as Eric constantly overcorrects his aircraft when he encounters turbulence. Another factor that should have alerted Eric Drucker that he should turn back was the fact that the turbulence experienced by his Bonanza was a lot heavier than forecasted. When Eric Drucker is fighting for control of his aircraft every time he flies into turbulence, it should have rung alarm bells in his head that the turbulence he's flying through may be too strong for his Beechcraft Bonanza to handle. The unexpected increase in turbulence severity, along with Eric's drunken and hypoxic state, made the situation within the plane a lot worse and made Eric himself a lot more susceptible to spatial disorientation. Despite all of this, however, the accident could still have been avoided had the pilots taken one piece of information very, very seriously. A PIREP from a nearby larger aircraft. When ATC passed information to the flight crew that a Boeing 727 near their position and flying at around their same altitude experienced moderate to severe turbulence around their flight path, it should have alerted them enough to turn the plane back, since a Boeing 727 is a lot bigger and a lot heavier than the Beechcraft Bonanza. So a Boeing 727 experienced moderate to severe turbulence will feel a lot stronger than for the people flying within a Beechcraft Bonanza if the Bonanza flies into that same turbulence. It is likely that Eric Drucker either disregarded or didn't really appreciate the size difference between a Boeing 727 and his Beechcraft Bonanza. Despite all of the alerts the weather and other aircraft were giving both Eric and Frida, they both decided to disregard these pieces of information and continue on their flight to Kansas City, with disastrous consequences.
While many pilot decision-making errors were made that led to the eventual crash, communication errors also played a large factor in the accident. As with many aircraft accidents, if just one of these events had not occurred in the exact way that it did, the crash likely would never have happened. The main communication errors which were contributing factors in the crash were the communication breakdown between the ramp workers, the counter worker, Frida and the receipt, and Eric and the check. Eric, being an anesthesiologist, was extremely insistent on using supplemental oxygen, even at altitudes far below that mandated by the FAA. Since his flight plan had them flying at 12,000 feet, he absolutely planned on them using the oxygen system. He asked the FBO in Duluth to fill the oxygen bottle while topping up the fuel and oil. According to the FBO manager Melissa Sanders, she said, "It was kind of an unusual request for us, especially coming in on a Saturday. We mostly sell oxygen to corporate pilots, or sometimes by special request with advance notice to people based here. The line boy either overlooked it or expected the Sunday crew to take care of it when they checked the oil. As there seemed to be no formal process in place of making sure all the request services had been completed, the Saturday workers left it for the Sunday crew, and the Sunday crew either thought the Saturday crew completed the task or did not notice it either. Regardless, the oxygen bottle was not filled. The girl working the counter of the FBO knew that a request for fuel, oil, and oxygen were placed. Again, FBO manager Melissa Sanders had this to say, "How it got by the counter girl, I can't say." The worker had originally done her job in informing the ramp crew what services had to be done. She did miss noticing that the oxygen had not been filled when she was processing the payment for the services. It was a very simple mistake to make, especially when it was such an odd request for the FBO. Unfortunately, if she had caught the mistake, it likely would have saved the plane from crashing. Eric instructed Frida to pay the airport service bell while he called flight service to move their departure time to 12 in hopes his headache would subside by then. Frida was given the credit card to process the payment after reviewing the bill. She read the bill, 38 gallons of low lead and 2 quarts of multigrade for $86.80 total. As it all looked good to her, she signed the bill. As the same as the counter worker, she too did not notice the critical error of the lack of a charge for the refill of oxygen. When Eric returned from his call with flight service, he took the credit card and the bill, which was folded in half. He never opened the bill, trusting that Frida had reviewed it. Once again, Eric is another person in the chain who fails to recognize this critical mistake. Described by his son, Eric was said to be a very meticulous pilot that did everything by the book. He was one to take his time of running through the checklists. During the walk-around, Eric noticed the oil had been filled past the fill line. This was a big issue, and he reported it to the service team immediately. A mechanic came out to fix the issue and was very talkative, trying to prevent Eric from being too angry with the mistake. Eric's pre-flight inspection ended up being interrupted 3 times. In the end, he never checked the oxygen bottle to see that it had been filled. This ended up being the last line of defense that came to catching the oxygen mistake. The combination of 3 major factors, along with several contributing aspects, caused the crash. The first factor was the decision to take flight after the Druckers had spent an uncharacteristic weekend letting loose. The second factor being the decision to continue flying into heavy weather, which turned out to be worse than forecasted and was confirmed by PIREPs from planes ahead. The third factor was the communication breakdown between Eric, Frida, the ramp workers, the counter worker, and the mechanics. Eric was not a regular drinker, and the residual intoxication caused by his drinks the night before were still lingering in his system during the crash. His experience with vertigo on 2 separate occasions so closely together was likely a combination of flying into dense IMC conditions while still under the influence of alcohol, while also breathing on the sterile air in his unknowingly empty oxygen bottle. If any of these 3 factors had happened differently, there likely would not be a crash report today. The combination of these 3 major factors, along with other aspects such as the pressure to get home and the pressure to leave at a specific time to avoid the upcoming MOAs, ended up being disastrous for the Drucker family. This case should be a warning to all pilots that even someone as careful and meticulous as Eric Drucker can fall prey to the many factors adding up to a cause of a fatal accident. Pilots that can stop any of the events can likely save their own lives, and unfortunately, this was not the case for the Drucker family.